Okay, so I wanted to go over some maybe just further drawing, not necessarily tools, because I showed you the tools already, but maybe some nuances and kind of how to use them a little bit more, because, just sitting and freehand drawing something can be a little overwhelming if you're not used to drawing in a computer program. So a lot of times what I do, what a lot of artists do, is they bring in an image. So let's say, I like these little flowers. Sometimes I'll bring in actual photos, especially with graphic design these days. With it being a bit of a political year, you've seen a lot of really cool graphic designs of AOC, Alexandra Cortez, who's I love. I know I've seen like TikToks and things of this, of people bringing in that image and then doing her outline and, just having her red lips and her dark hair and her in a great white suit. Anyway, so you can bring in photos of actual people, or I've brought in like my travel photos and, drawn over them and created different patterns and filled them with different patterns, things like that. So, always think that you can bring in an image and you can draw on top of it and create those vectored items. I mean, you can obviously always use something like this and actually I'll just go ahead and you can, cut out certain parts of it, and we'll get into cropping and masking in another tutorial. But anyway, so about kind of drawing. So this is where some fun tools and shortcuts. So if I want to zoom in, again, I push my control and I use my little, with my mouse. Oh, sorry, you hear my Advil. My little scroll here. Okay, so I do my control, I hold down and I can scroll in and really zoom in. And then I push my space bar and I click my left side of my mouse. And, you can see how I went ahead and I drew this stem, and with that I used the multi-line. I created a little ellipse using the circle tool, the ellipse tool, sorry, but circle tool basically. And then, went ahead and drew these little petals. So let's do this lovely little dandelion over here. I can kind of show you how you use it and some little shortcuts to help with it. So again, just so you know, I had brought in this image and I locked it. So, that I'll show you how to unlock it. And then, I lock selection. I'm getting that with my right click. So I'm locking this down so I can't move it, and I can draw on top of it. So I'm using the multi-line. I think it's the most popular to use, more than freehand. I think freehand can be kind of difficult. I see people usually where freehand can kind of help is if you're doing like lettering, or you're wanting to kind of sign something or make something in kind of that handwriting look. So I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to have no fill. And I go ahead and I usually, even if I'm going to change it later, I go ahead and draw in black. Again, you can double click up here, and I'm using 1 point, but you can change, you can obviously change the thickness to things. And I honestly will use the solid, and then I kind of go back in and change it. That's kind of what I do, but different strokes, different folks. So I go ahead and I'm going to even scroll in a little more. So I'm going to do the control, and I'm going to really scroll in here. Now you can see where it's a little pixelated, things like that, but I'm really just using this as a template. So I go ahead with my left click here, and I'm going to just do a straight line and do this bottom, and then left click again. Now I have this curve, and you're like, how do I get a curve? These are where there's some great shortcuts. It's called the drawing quadrant. And I want you to look down right now at your keyboard at the A, S, and Q, W keys, okay? So with no clicks, just practice here using the A and the S and then the W and the Q. So the AS are much more extreme moves, okay? And the Q and the W are, you know, a little tinier, no more gradual movements. So this is then, like, let's see if I can do this whole swoop. So a lot of times if I'm doing something this thin, you know, between like the stem itself is kind of thin, I'll probably end up using my Q and W's. So I'm going to go up here and you know, so then I just left click. I got that to follow pretty well. I'm just going to do straight across because again, remember I can arrange all these pieces and I'll be filling them. So I can go ahead because if I think of this stem is going to go behind, I'm going to just do straight across. And then I can come back down here and let's see if I can get this whole, so again, I'm pushing the Q to, and not click down on anything to kind of finish this up. And if I'm just going to go ahead and eye it here and say, okay, I did it pretty well. And I can then right click and that finishes, it closes out my object. Now I want to, you know, kind of show you how you can kind of modify some things, okay? So come back up here and, you know, you can do your direct selection. Obviously, you can always scale this any way you want to. A lot of times I draw everything first. I group them all together and the group is in a right click. I'll show you that later on. And then I scale them all together or do any of those stretches all together. But let me show you how you can kind of modify certain points. So let's say a lot of times when I open and close an object, see I'm a little bit off, especially if I'm a perfectionist, or let's say I was way off. This is where then you can go into reshape tool and see how it shows me my little points and I can kind of get them nice and close together. Now, as opposed to Illustrator, mainly Illustrator, you have to like join them in order for it to fill. You don't have to do that here in Style, which is awesome. This is also where like now you can start to see, here let me scroll out so you can see this a little better. You could see where if I do this point, you can see where, oh, this is actually my curve point. So I can always go in and modify my curves. Things like that. Or maybe if I wanted to, maybe if it wasn't perfect, I can always add or delete a point if something looked a little funky. But then in here, so now that I have my image, let's say I go ahead and I'm going to keep it as an outline and I want to fill it as, you know, this brown. And so now I can kind of check out, oh yes, it all looks good. And, you know, it fills nicely. And there we go. You'll really want to remember that you really want to think of everything as like kind of puzzle pieces. You don't want to leave anything open-ended. So imagine if I started up here and I went down, across, and over, and I was like, oh, I'm going to have this flower go on top. I don't need to finish this out. You do want to. It can create problems later on in your workflow, especially, maybe not as much in doing something like this, but especially when you get into drawing your clothing, you want to always think of your things like a complete puzzle piece. And you can always layer them on top, but you can't kind of slice them together. You'll kind of understand that a little bit more as we go along, but just trust me, you want to always think of it as a complete object with all the sides and it like a closed object. It helps fill it and it'll help you later on, especially when it gets to our clothing drawing. Like here, you know, with graphic design, you may not be actually drawing a complete clothing like garment, but you'll want to think of it for later on. So just some little tips again with here. Let's say I drew this circle. You can really, with the with the selection tool, you know, you can make any of those modifications that you want. You can stretch it so that it will like fit. You can, you know, you even have the rotate, those kind of direct rotate, so you can kind of draw that circle and make it fit to, you know, what the drawing, what you want it to be. Another thing you might want to just know of, so let's say I was going to do like some petals and I want them to be very symmetric. So now here is going to be an issue because I did not close this object in. I would want to go back and make this a full closed object, but I do want to show you something really quickly. With the direct select, I really can just do my Control C, Control V, and I've just copied it. And here I can start to arrange these petals. Sorry, I want to get the rotation, and I can start to rotate these petals. But again, I would want to go back and really make sure that it's like a closed object. It just makes your life a lot easier later on. Because let me just show you, if I try to fill it with this, I mean, it kind of does close it out nicely, but you'll want it just get into the habit of closing out your objects. So again, you know, you can do your Control C's, Control V's. You really are going to use any of these, but I really wanted to show you that multi-line and using the ASQW quadrant to create those curves. It definitely makes drawing so much easier in here as opposed to if you're used to it in Illustrator. So let me know if you have any questions.